Mark, if you want to come up. So, uh, Hi, guys. So we are in track one, and track one has two presentations. The first presentation is basically on Suite on HANA, and the second presentation is Cloud for Customers. So my name is Girish Bambani. I've been with SAP as a managing principal in the industry value engineering practice. I've been with SAP for the past 16 years. Again, thank you so much for coming to this conference. So the first presentation is going to be led by Brian Everett and Mark Thome. And Mark Thome is from Zinpro, and it's all about how they implemented Suite on HANA, as well as a add-on package which related to planning. So without any further ado, I'll give it over to Brian as well as Mark to get started.
Great, thank you, Girish, and good afternoon to you all. And thank you so very much for your time today. My name is Brian Everett. I'm an industry solution principal at itelligence, and really appreciate your time here today. Before we get into the slide presentation, I just want to take two polling questions, and I just want to ask by show of hands, if I ask you the question, how many of you feel like that we live in exciting times, that all of this technology out there is just wonderful, we have all these gadgets and everything is great, we have information at our fingertips? How many would raise your hands and say that that would resonate with you? Anyone? Okay, so a few of you. And if I flip that question, I ask the second question and say, how many of you think that, the times that we live in right now are pretty scary? That there's a lot of things going on with technology that we're not sure in our organization, and we're worried about change management and how to deal with that organization. How many people would raise your hands if that would resonate with you? Okay, a few of you. And also, I think that some of you answered and raised your hand both times. So I guess that means we live in scary, exciting times, right? So, and I think that that really resonates really, really well when you look at it in the world that we live in this digital world that we live in. It used to be that IT would be able to outpace the change that was happening. Not so anymore. You have a tremendous amount of data that's out there, and you're having to analyze it as part of the business. You're going to want to do that to be able to get ahead and be able to do that not only in your personal life, but also professionally in an organization. But at the same time, it has to be done in a simplified way. Okay? You also need to do that, and you need to be able to act upon information in having speed to the results of that information. And you need to be able to do all that. So I think that you can see right there through those three examples that you have exciting things, change happening, exciting things with explosion of data, but at the same time, very, very scary. And when you look at it from a company perspective, I really like Dan Schulman's quote when he said, the biggest impediment to a company's future success is what? Anybody know? It's past success. And think about that. So as we go through that, that's what we're facing right now. So it's a scary and exciting time. And as you go through that, what is that when we look at it from a perspective of digital transformation? When you look at it, digital transformation really is related, if you define it, to the changes to the application of digital technology in all aspects of human society. And we're really into that third stage of digital technology. When I was getting ready for this conference and getting ready to leave my house on Monday morning, I was just thinking about getting ready for the week and all that sort of stuff, and I thought about, well, what does this whole digital transformation thing mean? So I get up in the morning, and because I'm a Generation Xer, I still have an alarm clock. I mean, lots of people now use phones for their alarm clock, but I woke up to my alarm clock, and then I walked into my kitchen, and I asked Alexa, who you would think that 3 years ago that would be a person, but that's not a person anymore, asked her to play my flash briefing for me for the day. And then I get on a conference call for work, and then I also have a computer that's in front of me that's watching a WebEx session, and then I get a flight notification from my TripIt off of my phone, and on and I go. And it's really amazing to see all of that in application. And that's really what it is from a consumer perspective. And really, that's really coming home into the chemical industry now too, if you think about it. And that consumerism is driving the change into the chemical industry. So when you look at the aspects of how to handle inventory tracking and tracing capabilities, being able to see inventory real time and what the projected inventory is going to be if this happens specifically. Looking at being able to analyze the data in ways that you haven't been able to analyze it before, moving from a predictive mindset and being able to see how we can possibly use that in prediction. And then being able to take a look at what is going to be the whole planning of that inventory and the planning of what we're going to be making in manufacturing. That's really what Marx is going to focus on in large part of the conversation here, and what that means to provide that foundation of a digital transformation. And before I go, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of an example here from the personal perspective, and then how that's going to be going into thinking about what we're going to be talking about here further, is just the whole idea around a camera, okay? If you think about it, photography has been around for a long time. So I just got a photo album from my parents. They showed me all these various different pictures, and I thought to myself, well, gosh, it took a long time. The photo had to be taken. The photo had to get developed. It went over to the photography center to be developed, and then it's given at the store, and then you're going to be paying for it, right? Okay, think about what happened just 10 years ago, and it's only been 10 years. June of 2007 was when the iPhone was rolled out to the market. Think what happened then. You have a camera on a phone that gets to take in a picture, and you will automatically be able to send that right away. And we've been able to do that now for just about 10 years, but really it's a short amount of time when you think about it. And when you look at that from the greater perspective of what's being done in the ecosystem in the industry with companies, is basically it's no longer about a specific phone. It's a device now. And when you look at it from an organizational perspective, it's not anymore about a software package. It's about an ERP platform that can be connected to other devices, other things, that's going to be able to help optimize your business. And that's really what we get into when we look at the foundation of the platform. And that's what we at itelligence did alongside Mark Tomey at Zinpro, was to help provide some of that platforming here. And I'll let him go through a use case and an example, as well as what the results were from our project together. Go ahead,
Thanks, Brian. I have an example up here. It's not a very fancy or like something you'd see on TV where you have a cow hooked up to all kinds of electrodes that beaming up to a satellite. It's not like that. But I'll get back into a little bit more context about what Zinpro is, because I'm fairly certain not a single person in this room, with the exception of Brian, has ever heard of Zinpro before. But one of the things that we wanted or needed to do with our project was we needed to keep track of our stuff, of our inventory. And we were on Great Plains. We didn't have very good visibility to our inventory. And if we don't have good visibility to our inventory, we don't know where it is. We don't know how much to make. We don't know about how to position that inventory so that we can have it in time for our customer orders. Very basic stuff. So this is not a really fancy example, but it's a very real example. So one of the things we wanted to do, and what we needed to do with our inventory, is have less of it, be able to plan for it better. To be able, having less of it means you have less material in the warehouse, you have less touches, you have less working capital tied up in your inventory. And it also, we actually experienced this directly during the project. We can do longer runs in manufacturing, and that actually increased our capacity by 20%. So we had some very real gains that we could achieve here. One of the problems we have in our industry is our channel, or our warehouses, they are not very sophisticated. In some cases, the only thing a warehouse has is power. There's no internet. They don't do any kind of XML or EDI transactions, so they're transacting with their channel is very difficult. So one of the ways that we are trying to solve this is something called, we have Suite on HANA, so we have that in place. The other thing is what we call software-defined wide area network. And what that will allow us to do, today, there's a lot of manual interaction that the warehouses have to do to keep track of our inventory. So that means it's problematic, because we have to keep track of it at a batch level or a lot level. Because of the Food Safety Modernization Act that now applies to feed additives, which is the business that we're in. So it's very detailed information that we need to get from them, and although they say they're going to provide it, they don't. They do their best, but it's human error. They can only be so good at that. So they manually record it, they bring it up to the front office, and they key it in the system. So there's delays, there's inaccuracies, requires more cycle counting, those kinds of things. So what we're actually doing is we're going to put our scanning equipment in a third-party warehouse. And Cisco bought this company called Meraki about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's in a single device, we can hook our antennas for scanning. We can hook a printer. We can also connect to a wireless internet because our locations are such that that's sufficient because SAP is very light on the network. So we can actually have these third-party warehouses that the only thing they have is power. We can actually have them scan directly into our system to get more timely, more accurate inventory. And that's a big deal for us. So again, it's not like something you would see that's fancy on TV, again, because there's a lot of good examples there. But it's a very real example of how technology can transform how well you can run your business. So what I'm going to cover today, actually, as I listened to Brad's presentation for the keynote, is very similar, but with some differences, of course, because all these efforts that you do are somewhat different. So we did a project called Legato. Brad had a different way of saying this, but we needed to align on what was most important for us. I'll talk about that. About the people, because the people, of course, are the most important things. We always say that, but I have some examples of what that really means. The change management that Brian mentioned is very critical because at the end of the day, you can talk about technology all you want, but it's only relevant in the context of a human being using it. So it always has to be thought of with the human being in mind. And then just some course corrections that we took, and then some key points to take away. So what is Zinpro Corporation? It's about a 40-year-old company, and we create trace minerals for animals. And why is that good? It's good because animals that you eat mostly have, to stay healthy. And minerals, trace minerals are a key component in that, in particular zinc, and that's where the company name came from, Zinpro. So what we do is we combine a metallic salt with an amino acid, and that absorbs into the animal's small intestine much more effectively. So we don't do stage 1, 2, and 3 clinicals like a pharmaceutical company would do, but we do research with the ag schools. We have about 30 PhDs in animal nutrition. And what we do is we make sure that the science behind our product can actually get the results that our customers, or that we're selling to our customers. So when we go in and make a sale, we evaluate their herd or their flock. We say, here's where they're deficient. Here's what you need to add to their feed. And in doing that, here's the ROI that you will actually get. And if they don't get that ROI, we stand behind our product. They don't pay for the product. So that's the business model. That is the actual molecule. It's well known. Making it is a little bit trickier than just seeing it on a screen. So we are in 8 countries, offices in 8 countries. So we're in Brazil, Mexico, Europe, Japan, China, Russia, Australia, and North America. So even though we're a relatively small company, we have a very big global footprint, which of course presents a lot of challenges. So that's who Zinpro is. So why did we do Legato? Basically for one reason, growth. The company wants to double its size in the next 3 to 5 years, and with the current capability they had, there was no way they could do that. So that was the key driver, and for the most part, our ability to grow really was inhibited by our ability to plan. Our production capability has always been capacity constrained. So while we were doing this project, we were also building another plant, and for the first time in Zinpro's history, they would not be capacity constrained, which enabled us to go from a make to order model, where we're always allocating to customers, to a make to stock model. So we could make the product ahead of time, deploy it globally where we needed it. so that we could meet a service level, that our salespeople felt was critical in being able to keep the customer satisfied. So that was the real driver for this thing. It was really around planning. Now, Brad talked a little bit about having information to drive the business, and a byproduct out of all this, of course, is, we have information to know how we're doing top line, how we're doing bottom line, and basically having information so that we can adequately plan our business. So a couple things. On the people side, 2 points. We had the biggest impact on this project was really in manufacturing. So since that was what we had to get right, normally you have one person that leads the supply chain. We had 5. So we had 2 plant managers from 2 of our key plants, 2 of their right-hand people, and the director of operations, all involved in this project for the duration of the project. So they were shoulder to shoulder for 18 months. That's a huge commitment. I've done this 3 times with 3 different companies. I've never seen that kind of commitment before. But why that was really important in terms of our overall success is that when those people went back to their plants, to go ahead and go live with the system, they were really bought in. They owned it, and they made it work. We gave them a good solution, but unless the people are really committed to using it and making it work, you're only still halfway there. And so I would just say on the operations and manufacturing team, I give our people in the business high marks for understanding that when they were on the team making decisions about how they wanted their business to run, they went back to the plants and they made sure that it worked and people used it in the way that it was designed. And that was a key part of our success. The other part on this was on the IT side. We had, as Brad did, a very small IT organization. We had no SAP experience. We're in Minneapolis. That's where we're headquartered. So we were fortunate enough to have a couple companies that outsourced all their development to Tata, and we were able to hire 2 really good people, one on the operations side from the plant side, and the other one on sales and distribution, also a very strong developer. So with just those 2 people, we had a very good balance with itelligence to make sure we had a strong team, and we could challenge each other to get to a better decision. And the third part of the people is we couldn't have done it without itelligence. We didn't have enough capacity, and we didn't have enough experience. So it was a really good partnership with the business engaging, with bringing in our own expertise with SAP, and then leveraging that up with itelligence. Next part really is around what's most important. So the way Brad described this is he said, what's our leverage point? Well, for this project, and we have a pretty good relationship with our CEO, we were very clear about what's most important. The most important thing for our project wasn't schedule or budget. It was make sure that this is done right. We want this to be a quality solution when we go live. That's the most important constraint. Next was budget. Third was schedule. So when we went in and we did the project, we actually ended up changing our schedule and pushing it back 6 months, which in some contexts is a really big deal. In Brad's case, it would have been a disaster. But for us, that was the third constraint. So if we needed to push it back, that was a lever we could pull. The organization was fine with that, just like Brad was fine with that without having a perfect solution. We were fine pushing it back because we did want to have a perfect solution. So I don't think it's important, I guess, to agree on which of those constraints is most important for your project, for your situation. That, I think, is the key. For us, it was different than Brad. And when we came down to having to make decisions about changing the plan, it was okay to do it because we'd already pre-agreed that's the most important part of the project. That's what we're going to focus on. So that was a key component. Again, Brad's constraint was different than ours, but the whole concept still applies. So that part, I think, cannot be overemphasized. Because when you put a plan together, the only thing you know about a plan is it's going to be wrong. You just don't know how it's going to be wrong. And you have to have some leverage, to work through that. On the change management side, a lot of times I think this is thought of as kind of a foofy item. We don't need this touchy-feely stuff. I don't think change management is that at all. To me, it's 4 very discrete things. And again, Brad had this in his presentation. You need to communicate to the organization and outside the organization what you're doing and why, so you can prepare them for making the change they need to make. The other part is around team dynamics. When you do projects like this, and Brad mentioned it several times, his key dynamic was saying no. And that creates a lot of tension. And if you don't set up ground rules for how to manage that tension ahead of time, the dynamics of the team can devolve in a hurry. So just little things like, we're going to meet on time and finish early for meetings. We are going to treat each other with respect. We are going to listen to each other regardless of title. Those things may sound trivial, but when you're in the heat of the battle, if you haven't established those first, then it's pretty hard to hold somebody accountable when you get into the heat of the battle. And so I think that the team dynamics is a very important piece of this. The jobs, of course, change. We all know that. And then, of course, training as well to prepare people so that when they go and do their job, they know what to do. We had one slide that I think particularly helped manage expectations. And when you cut over, you're always going to have a productivity dip. That's unavoidable. The idea is to make it shallower and shorter. So if you do the change management things right, then that's what you're really trying to target. And so, this slide really helped manage expectations. As Brad said, and our CEO is the same way, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be a period of time where people are going to be frustrated. They're going to forget what they were trained on. It's going to take them a while to catch on. So that's okay. We'll do the best job we can preparing them so that when we go and actually cut over, we have a shorter and shallower dip. I'm not going to go into the job redefinition and training piece. These things are pretty self-evident. They're important. I guess the only point to make here is in putting together the materials, my experience has always been, sorry, it didn't go, thank you. My experience has always been that the people doing the work are not necessarily good tech writers and good at putting materials together for training. And so in having done this several times, planning to go ahead and have tech writers, prepare the materials, they wouldn't give the training, but working with the people that are knowledgeable is really key to making sure you have a good quality training for the people you're trying to prepare for Go Live. This is an example of some of the changes we made. Again, one of our big challenges was moving from a make to order to a make to stock. One of the things that we do when we do that, if we can make country-specific product, we do. But in many cases, we don't know what country it's going to go to. So we make a base material, and then we change it at the last minute before we go ahead and ship it to that country. So what we tried to do with each of the major changes is we tried to say, what is the change? Why are we doing it? And here's what we're going to need to do to take us and get us through that change. And this method, I think, worked pretty well because it helped people when they said, why are we doing this? Well, this answered that question because you have to have people aligned and on board with what you're trying to achieve. And if you just take time as a group to really define that and work through that, it helps people through that change process more effectively. When I came to Zinpro about a little over 3 years ago, they did not have a sales and operations planning process. And so it's pretty hard to do an ERP system without a planning process. So the first thing that I did is, we talked about it. We said, okay, we need to establish that. They had never really thought that way before. They didn't even know what S&OP was. So even though I'm the IT guy, I worked with a lot of planners before. I said, I will lead the project, but I need the people in the organization that are actually going to execute the planning to own that process. So we actually went in 9 months before we started the project, and we set up our first S&OP process so that when we came up with the ERP system, we could plug into that. And that was a key a key thing that we did to make sure that we were successful with this project. Again, without that, you have no process to plug into, and again, process is really very, very, very important. So a couple things that we did that you end up reacting to in any project like this. Originally, when I came in, the contract had already been written, and we were going to use Microsoft SQL Server, which is fine. It would have worked. We weren't so large and complex that that wouldn't have worked. So we asked the question before we started the project, should we use Suite on HANA? So Brian and I talked about it, and we said, no, it's going to add $400,000 to the project. It's going to add some technology risk. We don't really need to do it. And we said, okay, yep, that makes sense. Thanks, Brian. So we continued on our way. Then we went down to Sapphire, and I listened to people talking about it. And I had done 4.6C back in 2002, and then I went and did J.D. Edwards for like 8 years, and then I came back to SAP. So I didn't really know what was changed. And so HANA, of course, was one of the big things that happened in that time period. So we went back to Sapphire, and then we re-asked the same question. So I talked to a couple of people that were down there that were thinking about using it. We got together because we also host with itelligence, which has gone extremely well. And we said, let's ask the question again. Brian, hosting itelligence, should we do this? And we said, you know what? A lot has changed even in the last 2 or 3 months. It's real. We can manage the risk. And so, as Brad said, itelligence put skin in the game on both the hosting and on the, because they were the key integrator, and we said we're going to commit to doing it. So we made the decision to change that, and that was a really good decision. We didn't know how good of a decision it was until we added another component on that I'll talk about next. So that was one thing we said, yep, it's SQL Server. No, we changed that. We went Suite on HANA. I can say that it's been extremely stable. We've had absolutely 0 issues with it. It's been a really terrific product for us. The next part here was on what's something called G.I.B. And I'd never heard of it before, but it's basically like APO. It's like a poor man's version of APO, only the capability, I'd say, is even better than APO. It's a product out of Germany. It's directly bolted on SAP, and we were using it for forecasting, so that was supporting our S&OP process. But they also have another module that basically allows you to do your MRP in a spreadsheet type format. So what we did in probably about halfway through the project, itelligence has this process they call an innovation day, where you basically take a day off and you look at everything that you're doing and say, is there anything that we should be doing differently while we're doing the project? Are we missing something? So we did that, and this is what fell out of that process. So it was very hard to get the team to take a time out, look at what we got. Are we using everything we should? Is there some opportunity that is out there that we should take advantage of that we're not taking advantage of? And DCO fell out of that. So we decided that we needed to do that because the operations part of the organization, they were the ones that were going to have to run MRP. And they were not getting MDO4. It was just not making sense to them. You could see it in their faces, and we're like, okay, this is not going to work. So the director of operations and I talked, and we said, we really think we need to go ahead and include that module in the project, in the middle of the project. Now, we'd already done G.I.B for forecasting, so adding it into the technology stack was nothing. We basically ran a transport, it's up and running, and now we really had the visibility we needed for the plant people to go ahead and really execute MRP. So those two things together were huge for us because Suite on HANA gave us a very fast capability. We can run MRP in 20 seconds, system-wide. That's huge. And then you put on top of that the G.I.B operations cockpit. Now everybody can see exactly what the state of our inventory is, what the state of our production is, real time, and they can make the decisions to go ahead and really run the business the way they need to. So those were two things that we didn't even really understand were related, but that we made changes during the project that were key to the success of our outcome. When we went actually and made our go, no-go decision with the steering committee, I could look the operations director in the eye and say, John, we're ready to go. And he looked at me and said, yeah, we're ready to go. And he said it himself. He said, only because of this G.I.B product, because now we really have the visibility we need to basically run our business. So those were two very key things that we changed during the project. Another one was because we're in so many countries, we have a lot of localizations, they're called. So Brazil is an example. Brazil is an extremely challenging regulatory environment to deal with. Our business model with Brazil was to outsource all of that complexity with a local company that handled all that complexity. So we said, okay, do we want to try to configure for that with SAP? And we said, you know, it's inconsistent with our business strategy. And we've talked to other people that tried to do it, and we said, no chance. It's too complex, too costly. We already have a solution in place. So what we're going to do is we're just going to, right now, manually key the orders in both systems. Our volume is low enough so that we can get away with that. At some point, if it grows, we'll automate that process. And we will continue to evaluate it to see whether, in the case of Brazil, Japan, and Thailand, whether we need to continue this process or whether we need to automate it or whether we need full integration in SAP. So we went live, it was fine, and we'll look to optimize that as we kind of go forward. So that was another key decision, because had we tried to take that into scope, we would not have been able to go live. I saw that Mobilitas is here. Mobilitas is a transaction store and forward capability that is really key for us in terms of another aspect of our business that we do called colostrum. So what we do is we make a very high value product that's made from colostrum, and it has a special protein in there. It's extremely beneficial for young animals. And so what we do is we collect from farms in the Midwest and in the East pails of colostrum. We collect 50,000 pails of colostrum. And because, again, the Food Safety Modernization Act applies to animals as well as people, we have to track that colostrum from the farm we picked it up on all the way into the batch that was made in SAP. So we said we're not going to do that with SAP. Okay, so I don't know if there's any SAP people in the room that would disagree with that, but we said let's try to go with a capability that again bolts directly into SAP. It's another German company that built on top of that ecosystem, and it worked out great for us. So now what we have is we have 10 drivers in the field. They scan the farm, they pick up the pails, they scan the pails, they put them on the truck, they go to a depot, we store it there, and then we pull it into our plant. And then when we scan it to put it into the batch of what we're making, we scan each pail and we know exactly where that pail came from and exactly what batch of product that pail is in. So the Mobilitas or the Mobilitizer, which is their capability, was really key in automating that kind of unique and complex process for our colostrum business. So that was another thing that we added in that was not a part of the original scope. And then the last thing was we decided we needed to do handling units, because to minimize the number of scans within our warehouses and within our production facilities, trying to scan everything repeatedly as we move that material around was just not practical. So we agreed to do handling units, which was a big deal. but it was the right decision, and it turned out really good for us, but it was one of the reasons that our project needed to be delayed, because the IP that we got from Intelligence really didn't accommodate handling units, so we had to build that in. It took longer, a lot more to test, a lot more complex, but at the end of the day, it was the right solution. And again, our most important criteria was this had to work well for our business, and it did. So pushing the schedule was okay with them. So those are some things that we changed, and you can see that's a pretty long list of items that we had to navigate as we went through the project, and I think that went pretty well. Thank you. Okay, so what did we get out of this? The business results. So we were able to achieve our growth objectives. We added 3 new production lines. We entered several new international markets. When we started the colostrum business, it was 2.5 times larger than when we started the project. So that's an example of the kind of growth that we met there. And we also, again, from a regulatory environment, we had to do systematic track trace. And as I said, with colostrum, we were able to do that with Mobilitizer. And with SAP and our RF scanning, we were able to do that with native in SAP. From a planning perspective, we were able to achieve our migration from a make-to-order process to a make-to-stock process. So I think that worked out really well. And in terms of fact-based decision-making, we now have the information that we need to manage a bottom line and top line. I mean, the company is totally focused on top line, and now we're shifting and we have the information to really focus on P&L. So those are the business results that we achieved. The project results were basically, we added the additional scope, which I mentioned. This gives you some dimensional information about how large the project was. So we met the scope as originally defined. The cost, we were slightly under budget, and the schedule we moved. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. There's a red check there, and had that been our most important criteria, then the project would have been probably considered a failure. But because we were all aligned on the fact that schedule is the least important to us, cost and more importantly, quality and scope are more important, that's what we focused on. So that's how we managed the success of this with the business. So the effort, just again to give you some dimensional information about how big this was, it was a significant effort. We had about a little over half of our resources were from our friends at Itelligence. We had a significant amount from the employees as well, as you can see. Change management was a very important part of this. And all of these other things that I spent some time talking about were actually small. They're only 1% of the effort, but they had a big impact. So just because they weren't necessarily that many hours didn't mean they didn't play an important role in our success. From a hosting perspective, we're basically on ECC 6.0, EHP 7. You can kind of see the environments that we have, how big we are. The thing that I think is really good about the hosting is, since we went live in April with Itelligence, we had 0 unplanned downtime. Not once have we gone down. And that means a whole lot to the business. So HANA is stable. The hosting has been really good. It's a very price competitive arrangement that we have, and that's worked out really well for us. On the RISIF stuff, here you can kind of see what we did in terms of trying to keep it simple. We did have some customization in here, but not a lot. So finally, and I know, Brian, we're getting to the end, the key points to take home is the pallet license plating with handling units is complex. So make sure you plan for that. Make sure if you have IP from a third party, it can accommodate that requirement. Shadow order for international locations is a very effective way to solve for those locations. HANA works, it's fast. The G.I.B cockpit, key to giving the kind of visibility that our operations people needed to effectively run their business and transition them from a make-to-order to a make-to-stock model. And then, I didn't mention this, but lastly, we did try the web GUI, didn't find it to be that effective, so we're using Citrix to deliver the applications to multiple platforms. It's very manageable, very light on the network, and when you're in as many international locations as we are, that's key. So I think, back to you.
Okay, folks, so...
Long legs, so you can do
yeah,
that.
that's right. I could do the hurdle jump there. Okay, so hopefully you have a good story there, and thank you, Mark, very much for sharing that. From my itelligence side, it's been a true pleasure working with Mark and his team, and certainly having that opportunity to help the business in a true partnership has been just a great perspective. And I hope that, from the learnings that you've had or from the story that Mark provided you, you can see a lot of what's going on from a business perspective. Yes, it is about a system, but it's also about the people, and it's also about that journey that you're going to be on in the future. And that's really what it's about here in providing a foundation of a platform, just like we were talking about at the beginning about a platform such as HANA. And that really fits into a lot of the other portfolio of content that SAP has from a digital perspective. So when you put in HANA, for example, just as the platforming system, that really represents what I would say is the end of the beginning. And there's certainly a lot more to be done, and I know that Mark and I have talked about that and other initiatives to be looking at that. But having that good foundation within the business and the business being able to come toward you and saying, hey, how can we do this? That's really a great environment and a great cultural aspect to be in. What it means for you is just some ideas here of what and then the how of that, to emphasize some of the things regarding digital capabilities. Some questions that you can ask. Which capabilities do we require for our business? What degree do we possess these capabilities today, and how does the competitive landscape look like now and the future? Sometimes your competitors aren't really somebody that you know today, but they will be in the future depending on where your core competence of your business goes. And then finally, the readiness to change, and I think Mark hit that one home really, really well. A lot of emphasis on organizational change management. Are our people and processes ready to adapt? Are they ready for that? And then how do we increase that agility to be able to provide that foundation for this rapid, scary, exciting environment that we live in the world of digital? And that really concludes our presentation. So folks, thank you so very, very much for your time. During the week, we will be here, Mark and I. If you have any questions at all, we'll be happy to answer them. We're also going to be hosting some demonstrations of some of the other product offering itelligence has. Pick up a flyer here if you don't have one already. They'll be here by a chair for you, and look forward to certainly continuing that conversation as we move forward through this week. We have just a little bit of time left, and we'll be happy to take any specific questions that you have at this point in time. Anything at all? Yes, sir. There, we've got a microphone here if you, yep.
My question is, the architecture you have, you're showing ECC on one side and you're showing HANA on the other side. Is it some kind of hybrid you guys are using? Or?
I mean, in terms of running ECC, EHP7, and HANA?
Right. Yeah.
No, it's basically running, the core product is running under HANA.
Yeah.
So the core product runs, in memory. So it's not, because I know that there's the BI part, you can also do BW/BI on HANA. This is actually the core system running in HANA.
Yeah, it's Suite on HANA. Yep.
Thank you.
ECC runs in a RDBMS. This is replacing that with
Right.
HANA, basically.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I wasn't quite sure at the beginning either, because I'd been away from it so long.
Are you hosting it yourself, or do you have an outside provider hosting HANA?
And this will be our last question because I know I'm getting the hook here, but yeah, so itelligence, in addition to being an integrator, they're also a hosting provider. So in Cincinnati, they have a hosting facility that's designed extremely well. The guy that designed Amazon designed this one, and it's incredible. You go into the man trap, and it looks at your eyes, and it weighs you. And if you come out heavier and your eyes don't look the same, you don't get out of there. So it's pretty impressive facility. So what we do is we get both our basis support from them, plus all of our operating environment. And like I said, we have had 0 unplanned downtime since April. That's almost an entire year. Actually, It is an entire year. So that's really impressive. And we have basis meetings with our basis administrator every week. The meetings are short, 15 to 30 minutes, but we keep in constant contact. And just to make sure that we're staying ahead of releases and we can manage the landscape as we need to. So yeah, they basically do that for us, and we're very happy with it.
And that's really the true partnership that we have, and I think that is also very, very important, because those meetings are really itelligence also looking at Zinpro and saying, okay, what's coming up in the business? What is that roadmap? What is that journey? So that we can make sure that that underlying architecture is going to be sound and stable for them in a predictable fashion, right? So we can be able to scale that accordingly depending on where the business goes, how the business goes in terms of information that it's going to need to be having, the sizing of that information, so on and so forth. So we're able to scale that. And certainly those meetings are very, very helpful in making sure that we're proactive and responsive there.
We had 4 change requests up on the slide. I don't know if you noticed that. One of those, as an example, was we started smaller in terms of our resident memory and in terms of our storage, and then we bumped up 1 increment from there when we needed it. So we kind of started small so we didn't have assets that we weren't using, and adding that memory was almost the click of a finger. You want more? You got more. You need to pay more. That's fine, that's fair. And so they were very responsive and also very cognizant of the fact that we didn't want to pay for resources we weren't using.
Yep, grow as you go. I think there was, I know that there was one other question that you had right there. I'm sorry.
I was looking at the list of T codes and programs and functions,
Yeah.
which kind of boggled my mind that there was that few T codes. But does the cockpit that you were referring to, does that take place of some of these transactions that users had?
So the customizations were not included. So when we did the transports for the cockpit and for Mobilitas, those were not included in those numbers, because those were bolt-on products that, and so we didn't actually create those. We didn't make changes to code, or we didn't create that code ourselves. That was a kind of a third-party package that we just, bolted on top of what we had. And so we didn't include those in that number. Was that the question? Maybe I didn't get the
or was it pertaining to G.I.B. and the planning and the optimization?
Well, I was just thinking of our own system we have now, and we have tons of more transactional codes than just 95. So that's what I was trying to get in my head, is where did those go? So that was...
These were just the ones that we customized.
Okay.
So that's not all the transaction we used. That was just the ones where we...
I got it.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what it was.
Right.
So that's why it's such a small list. Good question.
No, guys, great question. So again, so I come from a HANA background. So again, I just love it, Mark and Brian, when you said transforming your core to HANA, it's just the beginning of multiple possibilities, guys. So any other questions so far? Any more questions? No? Great.
Great.
Thank you
Well,
very
thank
much.
you so very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. So we're going to meet here again in the next 15 minutes, when we're going to talk about sales transformation at Sealed Air. Look forward to having you over here. Thank you.